Kia ora and welcome to the Kiwi Advisor Network podcast. I'm the host, Warwick Slow, and today's guest is Katrina Shanks, who is the CEO of Financial Advice New Zealand. Katrina was a really generous guest in terms of the information she shared. I know that Financial Advice New Zealand do a lot of hard work behind the scenes. They're our only industry body, and their advocacy can get better outcomes for us as an industry. So enjoy the podcast. If you've got any questions, she's very open with how you can contact her. I think she even disclosed her phone number in this podcast, so enjoy it. Put it towards your CPD hours, and if you do get value from it, please share it with another advisor who might enjoy it too. Thanks and enjoy the podcast. Katrina Shanks, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here today. It's my pleasure.
So you're the Chief Executive of Financial Advice New Zealand.
Correct.
I'm really keen to know, how did you land the role? How did you get into it?
Well, it's quite interesting, actually. You'll see if you look at my career, I have a passion about making a difference, and I think there are some roles where you can really make a difference. And I think this is one of these roles. I truly believe that if New Zealanders seek more financial advice, it'll transform their financial health, wealth and wellbeing.
And what are some of the things that FANZ is doing at the moment to help everyday Kiwis in their financial literacy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a big question because obviously we don't do enough collectively as a whole sector. We can do a lot more. And I think as we do that, you'll see New Zealanders' literacy improve. So in New Zealand, we're pretty immature in terms of our financial literacy. And part of that is because we're really bad at saving and really good at spending. So when you live a life of debt, so we're great at running up a mortgage and paying it back, which is fantastic. And we're great at running up credit cards and also buy now, pay later. But in terms of saving, we're not so hot. So in the last 14 years or so, what's happened is we've had KiwiSaver come into place. And what you've seen with that is people building up levels of money in their account and they can see it grow. And with that, people get more engaged with their financial situation. And as they do that, they say, oh, all of a sudden I've got 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 in my account. Some people have got 100,000 now sitting in their account. And what that does mean, it means they're thinking about their money. What can I do with it? Can I put a bit more aside? It gets a bit infectious. They look at other parts of their financial wellbeing, such as the insurances. And then they start to be more engaged and start managing their financial wellbeing on a yearly, monthly and daily basis.
So KiwiSaver...
Did that even answer your question?
Yeah, no, I guess it did. I think you're saying, so KiwiSaver is like a gateway financial product into getting them into...
Absolutely it is. It's just like when you get your first job. And when you get your first job, what do you do with your first pay? And what do you think about when you get your first job? What can I buy? Because it's just natural, right? Because you've got money coming in. Imagine if we had the mentality of when we got our first pay, what can I do to better myself financially? What does that look like? First it would be going and seeing a financial advisor, because I think that's really important in terms of thinking about what you're doing with your money and your financial behaviours. So ideally, we'd love people in their first pay to get financial advice. So they're thinking about what they can do financially, short-term, medium-term and long-term. But more importantly, I think at that first pay, it's like giving them some guidance about where they should be going, what type of KiwiSaver they should be getting into. You know, should it be growth, balanced or conservative? And it's an age and stage thing, like everything. And then, you know, when you get your first car, you've got some money now, you need to insure your car. So I've insured my car. What other insurances do I need? Do I need to have income protection insurance? Do I need to have life insurance? And they're all age and stage questions. But I think it's really important as you go through the different ages and stages of your life that you recognise your needs change. And how do we get people and consumers to engage at their age and stage conversation? And that's what we're really poor at doing.
So what advice or what does FANZ help advisors with so they have those conversations early? Like, you know, if you've got a mortgage advisor or a personal risk advisor that isn't, I guess, delving into that investment space or KiwiSaver space?
Yeah, it is. I think more importantly for us, it's going to the consumer and building public confidence and trust in seeking advice. So previously in the past, what's happened, the media has been quick to beat up on anything that's happened with any poor financial advisor out there or any poor outcomes that consumers have received. And so consumers and clients haven't had a good opinion of what financial advisors are in the past. So it's about changing that narrative and putting a value on what financial advice is. So at Financial Advice New Zealand, we've commissioned 2 big reports, which have basically been consumer-facing. What is the value of advice and how has it changed your behaviour if you've received advice? So we've gone out to the public and all the stakeholders and having those conversations, but it's really hard to have those those conversations without any research to back up what you're saying. So now we've built that research, we can go and have those conversations with confidence.
In terms of surveys, I know there's a lot of advisors who have a lot of hot topics they always want to talk about or improve. Do you do similar surveys for advisors to help improve outcomes for advisors too?
In terms of standards for advisors, is that kind of where you're hedging towards?
Yeah, maybe like challenges or frustrations they have, or just ways we can improve the industry as a whole.
So definitely there are lots of frustrations out there for advisors. There's lots of conversations going on about clawbacks, whether they're right or wrong, about commission rates, whether they're right or wrong, do they need to be changed? So there's certainly lots of day-to-day concerns for advisors out there in terms of commercially, how their businesses operate and how they get remunerated for that. But I think there's a much bigger conversation to be had out there in regards to what is the value that I give my client and how do I get my client to give a referral to another client so you can build your business base. Because we know that many businesses, good financial businesses, are built on reputation and built on referral. So how do we give the skills to the advisor to tell the story about the value of the advice that they're giving, and it's not just transactional? And I think when advisors can deliver that story, that journey to the client and take them on that experience of what good advice looks like, then that's when the value is recognised by your client, and that's when the client will refer you to their friends and family. And I think that's gold. So I think there's a whole lot of soft skills we still need to build on about how the advisor can provide or show that value to the client in a really easy manner.
Because I'm sure you're working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes all the time. Is there anything in particular that, a better outcome for advisors that you're working on at the moment that you're able to share with us?
Well, a really good example last year was triple CFA, and I know it's a really nasty word out there. So triple CFA, remember, was put in place to protect consumers, and the changes in triple CFA, which happened would have been 18 months ago now. So it was December 2021, I think, when those changes, we all remember the day when those changes came into place. And basically what they did was they tightened two things. They made two significant changes. The first one is they changed the legislation. So directors and officers of financial institutions were responsible for any poor outcomes to clients. So that meant if you had a lender, you're in a bank and you had someone doing credit and lending to the client, if the client got a poor outcome, the director and the management basically were personally responsible for any harm that had occurred. In any other industry apart from one, you can insure for that, protect yourself through insurance, but the legislation didn't allow you to do that. So directors and the management had no ability to protect themselves from if there was a poor outcome. The only other bit of legislation that happens in is health and safety in New Zealand. You can't legislate out liability for a poor outcome. So what happened was the risk reduced for the banks. So the risk tolerance reduced for the banks, and they tightened up their credit. At exactly the same time, they tightened up the regulations. And they tightened up the regulations so that the lenders have to have a lot more criteria around their lending. So they put in all these regulations and examples, and when the lenders looked at it, they went, oh my gosh, that's really tighter. They needed to tighten up their processes a lot more. And the combination of the two, the unintended consequence of the two, was that credit tightened. And so no one really knew what the outcome would be until it happened. Even though through the whole process of select committee and submissions, the lenders told the officials that this is what happened, it actually did happen when the changes were put into place. So within a week, I was getting phone calls at Financial Advice New Zealand that mortgage advisors couldn't get any lending because the credit had become so tight. So the average Kiwi who could have got a mortgage a week before could no longer get that mortgage because they didn't meet the affordability criteria. So we waited for a couple of weeks and it was looking pretty bad. And so we went out to the advisors within our membership and asked for stories. So within 2 days, we had 300 stories come back to Financial Advice New Zealand about how the credit had tightened and how it had poor outcomes for the client that they were dealing with. So that gave us a great lot of ammunition, which we could then take into the public arena.
Oh, that word, poor outcomes.
Poor outcomes. So we started a campaign where we started releasing one story a day, saying we had 300 stories. It was right on Christmas. We took a bit of a breather for the 2 weeks over the Christmas period because the media goes dead. And then when we started to build into the campaign again to raise the awareness and try and put some pressure on the minister to get some change, we'd asked the minister for an urgent meeting at the stage. And then Centrix came out with a report showing that there was a real reduction in credit and the availability of credit in New Zealand in the mortgage sector. And that gave us the evidence to then bounce off again and start rolling out the stories. So every day we rolled out a story, and we were on television and radio and everything, and it started to get a snowball effect, and more interest and more stories came out. And within a couple of weeks of that, the minister announced that he was going to have a meeting with us and that he was going to get some urgent review done on the regulations and the legislation. And from there, we've seen that slow change happen where a lot of that's been reversed back. The legislation still hasn't changed, which is the key part, which is in terms of the officials and boards and directors being responsible for any poor outcomes. So it's still tightened to a certain extent, but certainly the regulations have loosened up around the affordability criteria, which has helped. So that's kind of an example of what we do for our members and for the sector at Financial Advice New Zealand to ensure that we get good outcomes, not only for the client, but also for our financial advisors.
Love it. It's a great example.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've got a political background. How does your relationship, or maybe Financial Advice New Zealand's relationship, work with the government or maybe the regulators? Like, how does that line up traditionally?
Yeah, so we have a pretty good relationship with both the minister, all through Parliament. We've got great relationships built there. The FMA and MB, we certainly are, they're very accessible to us and they're very open to change, which is great. So we've got some really good examples about how they've listened and how we've required change. Kofi was a perfect example, conduct of financial institutions that came in. So I remember in 2018-19, Jacinda and Grant got up on the podium when commissions are really bad, we're going to regulate commissions. We need conduct and culture for financial institutions, non-bank lenders and insurers, I think, were the three groups in there. And that's where Kofi came from, conduct and culture for financial institutions. But what it did was it scooped in financial advice as well. So remember, financial advice has got its own conduct and culture legislation through FSAR, and all of a sudden we were scooped into Kofi, and it was pretty much an unintended consequence. So we worked really hard with the officials and with the FMA and the Minister's office for them to realise the unintended consequences. They stalled the piece of legislation in the House, which is totally unheard of, just before the committee stage, took it out, did some more work on it and put changes into Kofi to take financial advice to a certain extent out of that legislation. So initially through that legislation, it said that financial institutions had to monitor, supervise and train financial advisors, third-party distribution. Right. They were responsible for that. With the changes that got put in the House, they've basically removed that. So the supervision, monitoring and training isn't there to the extent that it was, which is a great success for our advisors out there. Because the last thing we need and the last thing financial institutions needed to be quasi-regulators reaching into the business of a financial advisor and tell them what advice is. Oh. We know what advice is. They allow us to have our own legislation, and that's the story that we told and the journey we took the politicians and the FMA and MB on. And it's a good story and a true story. So they heard it and we're in a much better position where we are because of that.
So there's obviously so much that goes on behind the scenes that you do. How do you, I mean, some of it might be stuff you can't share straight away, but how do you communicate that consistently to advisors so they're like, great, fans on my side, I love being a member? Yeah,
that's the difficult part. So I have what's called a lot of water cooler conversations. So I think it's more important to be at the water cooler having the conversations before anything's put in writing and you're running behind the change because you're asking them for change. So I have a lot of water cooler conversations where, you know, we talk about ideas and issues and how we can resolve the ideas and issues before they are put in writing and solutions are put in regulations. So we try to get in at the beginning, and when you get in at the beginning, it's a really trust relationship that you need to build. So they need to know that I'm going to be talking honesty and openness with them, and being really transparent about what does happen, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then in return, they can trust me that I'm not going to go and talk about our conversations or put them in my newsletters, that, these are valued, trusted conversations, and together we build this relationship where we get the better outcomes as we possibly can. And when something's in writing, we don't always agree with it, and that's absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with that. They are the regulators. We are the industry. There's got to be a bright line. But we understand each other's position. And they're also still open to listen to new evidence we can bring to the table to show unintended consequences. But at the end of the day, we all want exactly the same thing, good outcomes for consumers. We want to build public confidence and trust in seeking financial advice, and the only way to do that is if we work together.
And you mentioned before a couple of the frustrations or, things that advisors would like to change. I mentioned like clawbacks or, commission amounts. Or how does that go about changing? Is it something you engage with the product providers, or do you go more for the legislation, which in turn influences those providers?
Or we try really hard to keep anything commercial out of legislation, because the thing about legislation, it's impossible to change it. It's really difficult to change legislation. So we try really hard at the beginning to keep any of that criteria out of legislation or regs, because it's commercial and that's where it should stay. Because I think commercially you should have the right to be able to negotiate with your provider about what that commission or what those clawback situations can look like. And I know in many instances it's very difficult for an advisor, because it's an advisor and you're working with a big institution. They've got their policies and procedures in place, and they pretty much follow those unless there's a reason for change. So, we've got some work on the side which we're looking at in terms of clawbacks in particular. So we'll keep doing that bit of work. So I don't want to talk too much more about that. But it's certainly on my work plan at the moment that we're looking at, and we're looking at just different ways that we can approach the issue.
So what's the best way for an advisor if they feel that there's something that's unfair towards them and they want a better outcome for the entire industry? How do they go about getting that looked at? Do they just call you or
give me a call? 021
Yeah, I'm on Snapchat.
021 474 010 is my number, and it's out there, it's everywhere, it's on the newsletter, it's everywhere. So I get lots of emails and phone calls, and honestly, pick up the phone and give me a ring or send me an email. I have a database which I run with all feedback that I get in terms of issues, and we slowly build that database up. So when we go to have a go at an issue, then I'll normally get in contact with all those people and say, okay, it's on our agenda, we're going to do something with it now. Can I have a chat to you about it? So we might not get onto it instantly because, we've got a pretty big work program, and we do pivot when we need to. If something comes like triple CFA, dropped everything to triple CFA for literally 2 months solid and not another bean of anything else, which is what I should have done, and it was absolutely right. So if it's really urgent, we can pivot. And, I take every complaint or every issue that we've got in the sector seriously, because I think, advisors give such good value and they transform people's lives so much that, you've got to be happy in your job, and it's got to be fair and equitable for all parties when you operate in a commercial situation.
I love that. How many have you got in the team at the moment, FANZ?
So we're relatively small. So in terms of FTEs, at the moment, we're at 4.5.
Okay, well, and then I know you've got like a few board members, et cetera. Like, what's the wider family look like in terms of people who are connected and involved, not necessarily in the day-to-day, but they're involved in the operations?
Yeah, so we have our structures. We've got 6 board members, 3 independent, 3 which are voted on by the membership. We've got 4.5 in the management team, which is me, basically, and 3.5 other people in terms of FTEs. And then we have what's called member advisory committees. So we have a lending, a risk, investment and financial planning member advisory committees, which got between 4 and 6 people in each committee. So that's who I talk to on a monthly basis to understand what the issues in the sector are. So they're people, advisors on the ground. So they're kind of the working committees for me, which I listen to, and they help me develop professional development and all that type of those things. And if I've got an issue, or if we need to do a submission, I'll go out to those MACs and ask for their feedback. So make sure I'm getting real feedback from advisors. We've got a corporate associates forum as well, which has got 20 members in it. They are mostly the significant FAPs in New Zealand sit in the corporate associates forum. We met today, actually. The reason for that forum is they have different needs to individual advisors, and they have a sometimes different lens, and different issues face corporates as individual FABs. So we have a place for them.
Is that more, head groups, or is that just large organisations?
That's head groups.
Okay, yeah.
So that's like the Astutes and the Wealth Points and the Shares and the New Parks and the Link Financial and the Cans on it as well. I was going to put you in. Cans in it as well. So we've got a whole range of leaders in the sector that sit in there, and that's really helpful for me. And, they've got a lot of experience between all of them, and I really draw on that group a lot as well in terms of how we look at bigger issues and what those bigger issues are and trying to run in front of them. And then outside of that, obviously, we've got membership. We've got 1,500 members, roughly, more or less. Can't remember which way it goes, more at the moment. Yeah, which we really need to grow. So the bigger we are, the more voice we get at the table with the government and also with MB and FMA. We have a pretty good place with it now, but obviously the more you have, the louder you are. It's just by nature, that's the way the advocacy works. But also, we'd love to have more members on. So if you're watching this and you're not a member, give me a ring or send me an email, because we'd love to have you on as a member today.
Great. And how does things like pricing work? Is it
pricing?
Yeah. People always ask about that.
Yeah. So it's about $850 a year or $68. No, I'm saying it sounds a ridiculous number, $68 a month or something like that. Yeah. So it's somewhere around that. We do monthly or we do annually, depending on what you prefer. Yeah.
Well, in terms of the outcomes that you can provide, it seems like from our side we're a member, so it seems like a really easy justification.
Yeah, so you get lots of things for membership. We do weekly webinars, which are really based on, we call it bringing the experts. We bring experts in to talk to you on the webinar about issues which are important, so they're quite topical. This week we did the retirement village. The week before that we had what we call
the retirement village.
Retirement villages.
Okay.
So, what are the requirements for a retirement village? Can you do it from a trust? So it was a bit of technical.
Right,
What's it cost to get into a retirement village? What advice should you be giving your clients if they're saying we want to downsize into a retirement village? All those types of things, what are the things you need to be aware of? On top of that, we've also got a toolkit for it. So we'll run a webinar and produce a tool, not all the time. So this tool is a tool that you can hand to your client when they walk out the door, things you need to consider if you're considering a retirement village.
Right.
So if a client comes to you, you can print it off, give it to them, and it's an independent bit of information that you can provide to the client that adds a bit more value. So for me, it's about, as a financial advisor, it's about being able to transfer your knowledge to your client so you're more knowledgeable than they are. How do you do that, and what tools do you need? So we run the weekly webinars. We do a weekly newsletter as well, which goes out to all our members, which gives you any reports that are released that week, anything that's newsworthy for you should know about to transfer to your clients. Will give you that knowledge base. So we do that weekly as well. And then on top of that, we've got a roadshow in August, which we're running through New Zealand.
Yes, I've got a ticket.
Yay! We've got one in March as well. We had one in March as well. We do a national conference, which is in Wellington in March next year, which is pretty significant. We had about 600 people at it last year.
Yeah, it was good last year. It was in Christchurch, wasn't it? The new centre.
And it's in Wellington this year at Takina, which is which is in the new one that's just about to open, actually. Fingers crossed that it opens, because otherwise we're going to be in trouble next year. Yeah.
Have it at your house or something.
Sorry?
Just have it at your house or something.
Oh, yeah, just have it at my house. Come to the terrace, it's all good. Yeah. Yeah, so, and then on top of that, we have professional indemnity as well. So we run a professional insurance liability program for advisors if they need to get PI or directors' officers insurance or cyber liability insurance. We have a really good scheme that you can come into, which has been really well designed, I've got to say. It's pretty exciting.
PI is a massive pain point for advisors at the moment. It's gone up significantly in the last few years. Is there anything what can we do about it? Do you have any ideas?
Well, our program hasn't gone up. So it went up only slightly last year, but it doubled the year before that. That was the problem. So it doubled the year before that. It's went up slightly last year. This year, it's holding its own in terms of pricing, which I think is pretty good. So we're really conscious of the pricing of that. So we've developed a program which we think is commercially competitive out there. We brought two new providers into New Zealand to offer PI. One was Ando and one was Berkshire Hathaway. Neither were in PI in the advice, in the financial services sector. We need to widen the pool of providers because basically it was just QBE, NZI were the two big providers in New Zealand and a bit of dual. So we needed to bring some more providers in to try and put some competition in the marketplace, which is what we've done. They're in their second year now in the market and they're pretty happy. So now they're happy, we can maybe start working with them on some other initiatives or looking at pricing or different ways of pricing.
Yeah. Are there any roles or maybe gaps that you'd like to fill? Like maybe somebody could volunteer to be a member of FANZ, or you'd like to see maybe some people putting their hand up to help out, or how does that work?
Oh, yeah, we'd love to have people volunteer to do stuff. I mean, it's great. I think, that the heart of a membership organisation are the members themselves. And as much as sometimes people don't feel like they're part of the organisation, the stronger we are and the more we interact, the stronger we get. So I think, if you're a member and you want to be more involved, give me a bell. There's lots of stuff that we do. We can put you on a Mac, for example. You can help writing columns. There's lots of things you can do. At the moment, we're running a campaign for Money Week, which is in August, and we've gone out to our members asking them to give us clips on your number one tip as a financial advisor at different ages and stages. So we're going to pull all those clips together and put them up on the website for Money Week and put them out through lots of different social media forums, which will be really good. But I think also on the Financial Advice New Zealand website, we've got to find an advisor where people can come in and find an advisor. It gets something like 80,000 hits a year. It's a fantastic pipeline for members, and people just randomly come in, and not randomly, we point them back to our website, obviously.
They probably just Google financial advice in New Zealand, and it probably
pops up, and they come back and they find a financial advisor. So, I think that's a really good tool as well if people are looking at getting new business or just, be part of a group that, is out there promoting what good quality financial advice is, because that's what we need to do at the end of the day, is get more people seeking good quality financial advice.
Great. And what have you got teed up, or if you might not have it planned yet, but for the conference, do you have any exciting parts you'd like to cover or anything?
Oh my gosh. So Conference 2023. So we've got Roadshow in August 1st to go. So Roadshow, we've got an economist speaking at every location. We've got politicians speaking at every location. We've got a little political debate going at every location, which
how do you pick those politicians?
Oh, yeah, it's pretty tough going, I tell you. Not that it's hard to find quality, but sometimes it's hard to find quality. Anyway, so, and then after that, we've got a Legs and Regs update. I'll be giving an update on AML CFT and on what a vulnerable client is. And then we've got the FMA coming along, giving an update on what they're seeing in their monitoring visits currently. So it'll be it's only a morning, so it'll be a really good morning spent to upskill yourself and to listen, especially to what the FMA is going to say about what they're seeing in their monitoring visits, which I think is really important. And then thank you for the plug for our conference, which is called Thrive, and that is in March, first week of March, in Takina in Wellington. And we've got a futurist, Michael McQueen, opening it for us. So we run the morning. So we think big picture in the first day. So we've got a futurist, we've got Sharon Zoner, an economist, we've got another keynote speaker, which we're just confirming now, who's a big business owner in New Zealand. And then we have lightning sessions where we pull apart 3 businesses and they talk about, or we kind of interview them about how they have manoeuvred within the new world that we're in. Part of that is Sam Barras. We've got a section with Sam Barras. We've got Henry, which is,
they're making waves, aren't they?
Yeah, making huge waves, but interesting because, he's a disruptor to something which is quite boring. Accounting is quite boring, right? But he's been quite innovative in that space. So we want to hear what that innovation looks like. We've got the CEO of Toyota New Zealand talking about how they're navigating their new environment because they're going to be 100% clean by 2040 or something. So that's going to be interesting for Twitter.
I like how you say accounting's boring. Don't you have an accounting background?
Yeah, I do. I'm a chartered accountant by trade. But I'm not anymore. But I actually still am, which is even worse. So I can't seem to let it go. But anyway, so that'll be really interesting. The next day, the way we've designed it is we have tools for your business. So we've got a big picture and we've got a keynote speaker opening, tools for your business, and in the afternoon we have tools for you. So tools for you, for example, we have 3 streams. One of them is going to be in communication. One of them is going to be on habits of highly effective people. I can't remember what the third one is off the top of my head.
I think that's enough at least to sink their teeth into.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm going on and on and on now.
Now, what does it look like becoming the chief executive at FANZ? What's the interview process like? Who runs you through that? How do you decide how that works? What was it like for you going through that process?
I don't know, actually. I haven't really overthought it, to be honest. I suppose it's like any job interview. I think you need to go in. You've got to have a vision about what you want to achieve. You've got to be passionate about what you want to do. And then you've got to be the right fit for the organisation. So when I came in 5 years ago, hard to believe, 3 organisations came into one at the same time, PAA, IFA and NZFAA. So it grew from, so having 3 became a very broad church. So you had mortgage, investment, financial planning and insurance as your financial advice base, which was quite wide. So it took me a little while to understand how to communicate with the 4 different types of advice. But certainly I think the board at the time was just looking for somebody who was fresh, didn't have any preconceived ideas about what it should look like or shouldn't look like, and had a vision that aligned up with the vision of the organisation, which was about ensuring New Zealanders could seek quality advice and supporting advisors to be able to give quality advice were the 2 parts to it, really. And it's pretty much stayed true all the way through 5 years later, and we're still doing basically the same thing. We're still trying to promote financial advice to consumers, and we're supporting financial advisors to be the best possible financial advisors they can be. And I came in because I truly believe financial advice can transform New Zealanders' financial health, wealth and wellbeing. And collectively, we can do it greater at Financial Advice New Zealand than you can individually make a difference and move that dial for people seeking advice. And that's why I came in, and that was my vision, and that's what I was passionate about. And that just happened to align with Financial Advice New Zealand and where they wanted to go. So it's kind of, I feel like it's been a privilege actually to be on this journey. I feel like I'm giving my ending speech here. So oh my gosh, stop me now. Yeah. So, it feels like it's been a real privilege to be on this journey and to walk beside financial advisors, especially through all the legislative change, through the new regime, through getting the level 5 qualification, because it's certainly been a tough environment. Throw COVID in the middle of it, and it's been like chaos and stressful for many advisors out there. And I did level 5 myself to see what it was like. So I've got life and health and investment and core. So I'm qualified, I suppose, if you're going to say that. And so I did that to see what the journey was like, to see how hard it was, to see where the gaps were in the learning that we could help at Financial Advice New Zealand. And with COVID and leading an organisation, like everybody that's watching this podcast, listening to this podcast, has gone through themselves. It's actually been a really hard 5 years.
There's been so much change.
So much change, and the advisors have just got on and done it. So all credit to the advisors out there who have just ploughed through it because you've had to, shown leadership in their businesses, worried, stayed up at night worrying about how they're going to pay their bills, worrying about what COVID's going to do, worrying about whether they're going to be compliant with the new legislation, worrying about whether their advisors have got level 5. I mean, there's been a lot going on in the last 5 years, and I think it's been fairly tough. And I think as a sector now, we can most probably take a breath for 5 minutes and pat ourselves on the back and go, we're not going to be perfect, but we're not going to be too far away either. So I think we can all breathe, not stress, get some good sleep, be kind to ourselves this year, because it's certainly been a tough year. We started with all the floods and the natural disasters. And I think sometimes we've just got to be kind to each other, kind to ourselves, kind to our families, kind to our staff, and remember to breathe.
Remember to breathe is an important one because I feel like we haven't had a chance to have one
and
the past few years.
And it's tough. It's tough when it's like that.
Even speaking to a business recently, and they had there's two people in it. One has been in the industry a long time. One has been in it the last 4 years. And the older advisor was saying, there's been so much change since you've started that any challenges that you have, you're just going to be so well versed for it because you've gone through all that adversity. So even though it sucks a little bit right now, good thing long term.
Yeah. It's certainly been tough, but all credit to everybody that's got through it and out the other side, because it's been a journey and you've been committed and you've been focused and you've done it. So I think the heavy lifting's been done. I can't see too much change coming down the pipeline in the next 5 years at least. And so I think we're actually in a really good space. We can focus on just doing what you love doing. That's giving advice.
Love that. I think that was basically all the questions I had for you. We covered everything. There's a lot that I had that you also covered as part of your
Sorry, I need a bell sometimes. You need to ding me with a bell.
No, that was very good. No, I think that's a really good scratch the surface. We can always do a follow-up episode at some point, maybe next year or something.
Perfect. A deep dive.
A deeper dive.
Deep dive into something that would be exciting.
What would you like to deep dive into?
Gosh, I don't know. I think we could deep dive into lots of things. We could deep dive into what does the career path look like for a financial advisor to stay a financial advisor.
Okay.
We could look at how do we get people to get on that career pathway to begin with, because that's something that people have struggled with, especially being commission-based. How do you have models which work for everybody? Then how do you have models that put them on that career pathway, I think is really important as well.
How do we bring new people in?
How do you attract them? What does it look like? I'm doing stuff at Massey University, with all the graduates coming out of there and giving, 101 speeches on financial advice to try and get them to go and do because you can do a financial advice degree now in your last year at Massey University. So, having all those conversations, there's 3,500 people that are enrolled at Massey University for business, and we've got 20 doing the financial advice course this year. So we've got a long way to go, though. 20 out of 3,500. Yeah. Got to start somewhere, though.
I can't imagine many, would be even thinking that.
Yeah, it's about exposure. It's about being excited about it. It's being able to sell it. And, if we could if you're wanting to do something and you want to go and speak a little bit of lecturing at some university, give me a call, because the more people we can get in front of students and talking about what a wonderful career this is and what they do and what it looks like, I think the better.
Could we even get maybe through FANZ have a list of businesses that are looking to grow and are happy to mentor or maybe bring people through?
You should be this deep dive thing as well. Yeah, that would be really good as well. We'd love to do stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think now that we don't have to focus on qualifications and legislation, we've got this headspace now to go to that next tranche of what we want to do and how we can make a difference. I think this is the next stage.
Cool. Very exciting.
It is, actually.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to see the full episode.
Yeah.
I always listen back to them as well, and just like good to reflect. And I think there's a lot of value in here. And I think hopefully you got a few more advisors joining FANZ as well.
Yep. Well, don't forget, join Financial Advice, because we would love to have you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.